Hi everyone, welcome back to Paying IT Forward, where we demystify everything IT, business, and digital transformation. I'm Ubi, and today I'm going to be talking about enterprise architecture. Now, some of you might be familiar with what enterprise architecture is, some of you might not. Some of you might be a bit more familiar with similar terms or similar roles like solution architecture or technical architecture. Personally, for the first couple of years in my career, I didn't know what enterprise architecture was. So today I'm really excited to demystify enterprise architecture to anyone listening, and most especially if you're a business of any decent size and you're looking to scale or grow your business in any significant way or implement digital transformation in your business. I'm hoping this video highlights the importance of enterprise architecture and why you need to consider it at this point in time for your business. Hope you enjoyed the video. Right, so let's see what PwC has to say about enterprise architecture. They say enterprise architecture aims at optimizing legacy or fragmented processes, information technology into an integrated environment that facilitates easy decision making and change implementation. Now, let's break that down with a bit of context. When I talk about enterprise architecture, I think there are two major things that need to be established first. The first thing is that enterprise architecture, like the name sort of implies, focuses on an enterprise's operations. Now, you can define an enterprise as a multinational. An enterprise can be a multinational business. It can be an education institution. It can be a charity. It could be a local business. It could be a department within the business. So whatever scope you want to pick or choose, an enterprise architecture would focus on that enterprise unit's operations. The second thing that needs to be established is that every enterprise is going to go through some sort of change. And in order to implement that change, you need to change the operations of that enterprise. Now, changes could be triggered due to either internal or external reasons. For example, internally, the business might just want to grow, scale up, increase its revenue or profit margins. Externally, a business might need to, adapt to market conditions, adapt to customer needs, adapt to competitors, adapt to technology trends like artificial intelligence or digital transformation. So that's the second thing. Change is constant in every enterprise. At whatever, the cadence might be different, but change is definitely constant. Now, if you can accept those two things, firstly, that enterprise architecture focuses on an enterprise's operations and change is constant in an enterprise, you're in a much better position to appreciate the value of enterprise architecture. Now, the value of enterprise architecture comes at a point where you need to make decisions about the changes you need to make to an enterprise's operations, either to meet a current goal or a future goal. That is the key value of enterprise architecture. Now, if you're a business owner or you're a senior executive or you belong to a company, you're probably aware or have probably experienced that a lot of change initiatives don't hit the intended mark or the intended goal, or sometimes these projects just fail. So enterprise architecture increases the chances of you getting a successful project the first time around by reducing the risk or any risk that might come up in a project. And that is the value of enterprise architecture. So I think it's very useful to talk about enterprise architecture with some sort of case study or example to bring things into context. Now, let's define company A as a company with, say, 30 to 50 personnels. You have the owner of the company who probably knows everyone's names. Um, people and that the owner of the company probably understands how the business works A to Z in their heads without even needing to document it. And that happens a lot in businesses as well. So in that scenario, you don't have multiple or too many applications that you need to integrate. for data flow in the business. It's much more simpler and easier to manage changes. And there's no, like, the financial impact of getting changes wrong can easily be absorbed. You can adapt to changes much quicker as well. If something doesn't work, literally you change it overnight, and it's like nobody noticed, or it doesn't have any significant impact on business operations. You can roll back changes much easier as well. Now let's contrast that with company B that has 200 to 500 personnel, where you have multiple departments, where each department has multiple processes that need to be input or flow into another department's processes. In that company, you probably have multiple or a larger number of applications as well, where data needs to be integrated, from one application or from one department to another. So I think it's obvious to see, like, in this, comparing these two scenarios, it's much trickier managing changes for company B, because there's just more things to consider. You need to be more clear on how things work so you make more effective decisions. And there's also a greater financial impact when you get things wrong. You can't just roll back changes. The changes you make are going to have a much more significant impact to your operations, and probably a bigger financial impact as well. So you need to be a bit more careful about change. And that's kind of what I've noticed in the industry as well, where, when companies are of that smaller size, company A, they don't really need an enterprise architecture capability. But when you start to consider your bigger company, 200 to 500, not necessarily by size, but maybe you have a more complex technical architecture, you have more applications to consider, you now need to incorporate enterprise architecture to increase the chances of success with your change projects, and to have a more slick operations, and to reduce technical debt as well. It's very common, I've seen, where companies go through this evolution where they try, getting from that size of, say, 50 to 200 or 500, they try doing changes the way they are used to. They try, just making changes without implementing enterprise architecture as such. And what they notice is that, some of these changes start to fail and not as successful. So they find the need to implement enterprise architecture, so they're a lot more successful with implementing their business changes. So I think it's important to highlight what makes enterprise architecture valuable. I think the first thing that comes to mind is it's equivalent to thinking on paper. It allows you to think on paper when it's time to make decisions about operational changes you need to make in your business or your enterprise, whatever enterprise we're talking about. And I think a lot of you might know the value of thinking on paper, even for like smaller types of problems that you have. When you have everything in your head, it can get overwhelming, and things might seem a bit more complex than they are, or things might just be more difficult to process. But when you're able to think on paper, when you're able to document, because documentation is a massive part of enterprise architecture, when you're able to document things and you have a blueprint of things, of how things work, you're able to think on paper, you're able to make better decisions because you have clarity. So I would say one of the key things that makes enterprise architecture valuable is it allows you think on paper and make decisions based on that. The second thing I would say that makes enterprise architecture valuable is because it takes a comprehensive approach to change. And what I mean by that is that it considers the relevant domains that you need to consider when making changes in an enterprise or a business. I think different frameworks have different categorizations for this, but I think more commonly, it considers changes in your business domain, which is talking, which refers to or considers things like value streams, business capabilities, organizational charts, things like that. It considers changes in your information and data domain, looking at, what data inputs does a personnel need in operations, what data outputs do they need to make in daily tasks. How does that data need to flow in the business? What sort of reporting is needed in the business as well? What kind of data points need to be identified or tracked in the business? It considers that as well. Things like KPIs, all of that. It also considers the application domain that focuses on enabling the functionality that your business personnel might need to carry out their daily tasks. So they might need different applications, different solutions, even custom solutions. So it considers the functionality through technology, to the different people in your businesses that need to carry out different processes. It also considers the technology domain. This is sort of the infrastructure that underpins IT or like business operations as well. So things like servers, do you need data centers? Do you need connectivity, internet, things of that sort? So it's robust in that way and comprehensive in that way. And finally, it also considers security. It considers things like cybersecurity and data privacy and things of that sort. So it connects all these 5 different domains and considers change across all of them, which is part of why it's definitely much more successful in identifying and mitigating any risks that come with implementing changes to your business operations. The final thing I would say about why, what makes enterprise architecture valuable, I think would be very, very attractive to, business executives, senior business executives. And that is the fact that it mitigates financial risks when it comes to implementing changes to your business operations. So because it's comprehensive, it gives you clarity and allows you make better decisions, you're more likely to have a more successful change implementation the first time around rather than doing it without enterprise architecture. So a lot of companies go through this where, they don't have an enterprise architecture capability. They make changes doing it their own way, without a lot of clarity. And, on a particular project, they do that project, maybe 5, 10, 15 times, and it doesn't hit the intended mark. It's not as successful as it was anticipated to be or intended to be. But with enterprise architecture, because of how comprehensive, because of the frameworks and, the expertise within enterprise architecture, you're more likely to need fewer tries to get that change implementation right. You're more likely to get it right the first time, than without enterprise architecture. So by doing so, it's cost effective and it's efficient. So that's the final reason I'll say enterprise architecture is valuable to your business, to your enterprise, to your business operations. So I think it'll be quite useful to compare and contrast between enterprise architecture and business analysis. Um, I'm a certified business analyst with the BCS, the British Computing Society, and I'm also TOGAF certified as an enterprise architect, both on the foundation level as well as the practitioner level. So I can definitely appreciate sometimes the confusion that comes between, these two disciplines. So I just thought it would be useful to shed some light on that. Now, in my opinion, I feel like the major difference between enterprise architecture and business analysis is in the way it's implemented in an organization. I describe enterprise architecture as being a bit more, as being proactive and continuous in the way it's implemented. while business analysis is a bit more reactive and sporadic. Now, just for the basis of this video, I also want to clarify that I'm talking about enterprise architecture and business analysis in relation to business operations. Now, you can have a business analyst working in software development, and that might be a bit different. But for the purpose of this video, I'm just talking about business operations when it comes to enterprise architecture and business analysis. So going back to sort of give context to enterprise architecture being a bit more proactive and continuous, you tend to find in organizations where enterprise architecture has been implemented that change is driven through enterprise architecture. There's a real sense of ownership by your enterprise architecture capability around change. Enterprise architecture is, or the enterprise architect is involved from the strategic level, working with, the C-suite to define the changes on the strategic level, down to the program level, down to the project level, and through to solution delivery. And even after a change implementation project, the enterprise architect is involved in things like compliance assessments, change implementation, change management, to make sure that the intended outcome of that change has been achieved. And if any further, projects need to be implemented to correct for certain things, that is done through enterprise architecture, that's initiated through enterprise architecture. So there's a real sense of ownership that is proactive and continuous when you think of enterprise architecture. Now, in contrast, business analysis, even if it's a very similar skill set, you tend to find that a business analyst gets involved in a project in a more reactive way. So there's probably a problem, and a business analyst has been brought in to investigate the problem and find a solution or propose a solution to that, problem, hand that off to people to implement it, and, they go on their merry way. It's not the same level of ownership as with enterprise architecture. Enterprise architecture really has a strong sense of change management and ownership with it, while a business analyst tends to work in more of a consultancy fashion compared to enterprise architecture. So I would say like that describes a major difference between enterprise architecture and business analysis, where enterprise architecture, there's a real sense of ownership, it's more proactive, and it's more continuous in the way it's implemented, as compared to a business analyst who leads by influence. That's another major thing. It leads by influence and gets involved in a more reactive way and is more sporadic in organizations, how in the projects that they work on, and things that they are involved in. So I think that sort of describes the major differences between enterprise architecture and business analysis. Enterprise architecture can also be looked at as a progression of business analysis. While business analysis is a wide skill set, an enterprise architect is sort of a niche or a more senior um, is a more senior discipline, functional discipline within IT that has real ownership around change and decision making around that change in different organizations. Thanks for watching today's video on enterprise architecture. We've been able to define what enterprise architecture is. We've also been able to highlight why, when, and how enterprise architecture can be valuable to your enterprise or business organization. And finally, we're able to contrast between business analysis and enterprise architecture as two major and relevant disciplines. So, hope you enjoyed watching the content today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and also comment and also interact in the comment section. It's really valuable for me to understand different ways I can make the content more useful and valuable to you. So don't forget to do that. And remember, it's PITF with OB on all social media platforms. So until the next video, take care.